Emilio in a text message referred to it as the hybrid contracts of the Rapids 2 then turning into a homegrown contract. I think when I've written and posted about this, I've called it a pre-contract. Are you guys calling it a hybrid contract, and how did this thing exist, or did you make it exist?
Um, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a brand new concept, and it's something that we probably did for the first time, I think, with Adam Beaudry. As you know, what it allows us to do is get guys on a professional contract, kind of professionalize everything they're doing while still giving them a bit longer runway, giving us a bit longer runway, giving us more resource in the first team roster as well. So it basically, we're able to identify guys that we are pretty certain they're going to pan out into guys that are deserving of a first team contract, but for a variety of reasons, both for the player and for the club, it probably makes sense for us to, extend their on-ramp, if you will, but have that guarantee of moving into the first team as they go forward. So it's kind of I would say it's a mutually beneficial arrangement between the player and the club to continue their development pathway.
Was there anything from the league that you guys had to do to make this? I don't know if we even call it a roster mechanism, but I mean, did you have to get the league's approval, or were you just doing this go ahead.
Because, yeah, I mean, it's one of those weird things in our league where we have to have the league on board because they're actually signed. The players sign with the league, and when they're dealing with the MLS portion of the contract, and when they're dealing with the NEXT Pro portion of the contract, they're dealing with the club. And so, yes, we have full, cooperation with the league on setting it up and ensuring that there's kind of a seamless transition from the NEXT Pro contract with the club turning into transitioning to a contract with MLS. So they have to be generating paperwork on the front side of this as well.
From a player personnel standpoint, what changes about what Eric Boucher is doing with the Rapids 2 program for these players, knowing that you've got that roster, you've got that mechanism built into the contract? Is he speed running something that he's doing for a player he only has for a year, or what changes about his work with the player for a player who's under this contract situation?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think too many things necessarily change. I mean, in no case, especially with young players, I guess if I back up a little bit, like with an older player that's, say, a DP or, player above 25 or whatever, there's a more linear expectation of that player, right? They come in, they're expected to, come in, make an impact. That's the way that part of the gig goes. With a young player, it is expected to be less than linear in the way they go. They're going to be challenged. They're going to, have days where it doesn't quite go well, but then the high has to be higher next time and the low has to be higher next time as well. And so, you're building that in. When we do these types of deals, what people get focused on, and including the player, is, and at times maybe even the coaching staff, but is the label that's on that player's contract. But the reality for us is that whether it's Alex Harris on a GA deal where we know he's got to flex down into the second team, or whether it's Sidney Watuda on a second team contract that's got to flex upward into a first team environment as available, as needed, and as earned, that flexibility is always there, and it doesn't really depend on the label that they earn with the contract. And that's actually probably why publicly it's more beneficial for the player to have that expectation where they seem like they're moving forward instead of backward at the beginning. Because if they sign a first team deal and then all of a sudden they're seen as a second team player, like, it's just a weird perception thing And the great thing about what we do internally is we know we're signing players to the system, and whatever the label is for that player doesn't change the professional minutes we're trying to get them, the individual development plan we're trying to create for them, and the way we approach the development of that player. So back to your original question, I don't think there's a ton of necessarily a ton of difference in the way they're going to get approached, because they will be challenged. They haven't earned anything different than anybody else we put in the system, as far as their daily work or what they've got to get accomplished. So yes, anytime you're on a professional contract, the clock is ticking, right? Because it's now time to earn the next contract. But with that in mind, I think you still have to be bought into the process of player development, not the label of what your contract looks like. And I think the players understand that pretty well when they sign with us by the time we get to that point, and certainly our staff understands that.
That's a really good point I hadn't previously considered about the labeling of, if I just think from a fan perspective, kid signs a homegrown contract, or, Ali Fadal signs a first-team contract but then is loaned down to Rapids 2, how maybe that difference in the perception or the expectation, I don't know how much that filters down to the player. I would hope the player compartmentalizes that, and you guys do a good job of interacting with them to where they know where they stand. But I can see where that's different than a Grant Gilmore who signs a Rapids 2 contract and then has built in an MLS contract where it's, this is a guy who's up and coming, I can see him ascending, rather than a young kid who maybe doesn't impress in preseason and then gets demoted to Rapids 2. That's a really good point. Tell me.
Yeah, and I mean, in Ollie's case, uncontrollable things, right? He gets hurt early on last year, and the only way he's going to start is to get himself back and go through that process. And so, the outside world might not see all of that, and it's something we have to spend a lot of time on with the player and the staff to make sure that our messaging is good and our support for the player is good, and no matter where they start, we're getting it right for them.
Good to hear. Tell me about Nathan Tchumba. What should I know about him? What should fans know about him now that he's now that he's with Rapids 2? I don't know. There was a lot of people watching him at the academy.
Yeah, I mean, the only people watching him in the academy would probably be the national team junkies, that would have seen him at the youth national team level and things like that. And I mean, Chumba is an exciting prospect. When you look at him, you won't see a 14, 15-year-old kid. You're going to see a physically talented and developed player that he certainly has a presence from minute one. Then you realize that he's not just a big kid that has a presence. He's a good soccer player. He's got good feet. He moves extremely well for a kid that is still growing into a body that's impressive. And so, I think when we look at the entire package from a physical, from a psychological, from a technical standpoint, we see a player that it has a lot of upside and is a very exciting prospect. And I think, when you look at the other guys that we've got in those kinds of situations, we probably feel the same way. But he's the latest in a line of guys that we think has all those kind of baseline characteristics, and nothing that you feel is a fatal flaw.
Tell me about Luis Garcia. How did you guys find him? What do you think? What are you looking for him to do on loan with Rapids 2?
Yeah, I mean, Luis is a player that we actually have been monitoring for the last couple of years while he was in Colombia, and then again while he was on loan, or while he was in Panama. And we were not in a position with some of the names we've mentioned maybe to bring him into a good situation last year. I think this year there's going to be more opportunity and more of a need in the second team to get that right, to be able to use international spot on a player. And he's another very good athlete that has been a soccer player that can play deeper in the midfield. He's now started carrying the ball forward. He's had some experience at right back, which I actually think has helped him on the ball and with his decision making and some of his forward passing. And the cool thing about that is I think he is going to be a slightly more mature presence that can help a player like Jumba develop, while we're still looking at Luis as a player that has high potential as well. And so as we construct the roster, some of the complementary pieces to make sure that we're not either hiding somebody or in some way slowing development, it kind of fits all the boxes there.
What do you do during preseason, Brian? Because, now I think Rapids 2 now are in Florida as well. Are you staying here? Do you go to preseason? How involved are you in the day-to-day of preseason once you've got...
Yeah, I'm in Florida currently. You're correct. We had so I spent the first 2 weeks out here. We had a bit of a trial this week in Denver with the second team that I came back for the last few days of that, right before I saw you last, probably, and leading into the break between segments of preseason. And then the second team came with the first team 2 weeks ago. They will wrap things up the same way as the first team will in Orlando tomorrow. So we're getting ready to leave the hotel here in about just less than 2 hours to head to Orlando and prepare for a day of matches tomorrow. And then I've been, for the most part, I've been here, and we have interaction with first team staff. We have interaction with our senior leadership here. We are pretty constantly working on roster, player evaluation, where a player is going to be placed as a starting point when we get to next week, and we kick a ball in anger for the first time. How would those groups take shape? And then we're still evaluating, especially in the second team where it's a kind of filter down system, what now become our needs in the group, and can we fill any spots that we feel could improve the overall group, or where we have an opportunity for talent to come in? What are those kind of last moves we're going to make before we really get going?
Do you have the weekly player personnel meetings that I know were normally on Monday last year? Do you have those during preseason, or is it more episodic based on when it's advantageous for the preseason calendar?
As far as like bringing in, say, the extended staff, the support staff, maybe the equipment guys, and those things, we're probably not as formulaic about that. But we literally have player personnel meetings every single day, because we'll eat breakfast talking about players and player movement. We'll go to bed at midnight talking about players and player movement, and so especially in an environment where we're doing a couple sessions a day now with both teams, you wake up, it's kind of embedded in those conversations, and you go to bed embedded in those conversations, and there's still movement on a daily basis because of that. And it may be a little injury, it may be somebody doing really well in a second team session, it may be just a need in the type of session we're going to put on at one level or another, and that is the process over a 30-day period. So the formalized stuff that we will kind of go back to having a formula for will come back on Monday, as we kind of get into a weekly rhythm now. But when you're in this 2-a-day type scenario, or at least captured environment here, it's a constant conversation.
Mm-hmm. I like to say, Brian, that the MLS season hasn't actually started until I'm getting that the weekly Colorado Rapids schedule email. So I'm very excited to receive that from Emilio and Gabby later this week. So glad to see that you guys are also getting
close. We're getting close. I think everybody's going to be glad to see that come out, because that means we're back in the fight.
Yeah, that means we are so back. I don't know how much you can or you want to say about this, Brian, but are there any lessons learned now, a few months removed from having to take Bilo Diop in the draft?
No, I think I think everything was probably said by us using a high first round pick on him and what we think of his talent and what we think of the importance of us being able to have the option to sign him at the first team level. I will leave that as a pretty open-ended thing right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, clearly we were willing to go to pretty great lengths to make sure that we had the option, the MLS option to sign him, and that's probably all the statement we need to make right now about that.
Okay. I think I said this. I might have written it. I think that's a potential loophole that the league could deal with, and I'm sure they'll resolve that just like they did with all of the roster rules and regulations that just came out this week. Brian, what are you looking forward to for the R2 players who were brought in last year that had so much success individually and collectively? What are you looking forward to for that group specifically to come back and maybe lessons learned, second year as a professional, a Charlie Harper type player, a Josh Copeland? Where's the joy or where's the excitement for you for that kind of R2 core working with Eric in 2026?
Yeah, I think the one thing that really stands out when guys like that come back into camp is how much they matured in the last year. What that process has meant to their development, because then you add players into the mix that have not gone through that, and you can see people going from boys to men in a soccer sense, sometimes in a literal sense, but it is quite clear who knows how to train properly, who knows how to play the game in a way that and approach the game and the training in a way that can help make sense. Sorry, we're being invaded, I think. In a way that can help their careers, and we've seen that. We've had a lot of those guys have had different interactions with the first team at different times during preseason, even though it's been a fairly short overlap here. So it sticks out, the work that Eric and his staff are doing on a daily basis, and how much better prepared these guys are to come in and continue to inch forward in their careers, and that's a really fun part of what we see. And it highlights the process that's going to have to take place with the guys that are coming into the group and as new players. So it's exciting.
Last one for me, Brian. What made sense? I agree with the decision to loan Adam Beaudry out to a place that he's going to get minutes. USL Championship is a good level for where he's at right now. What made Loudon a really good fit for that opportunity?
Opportunity. I mean, sometimes what you find is that sometimes clubs are, especially USL Championship clubs, probably don't want to be seen as a group that are that will take on a young player, whether it's legitimate or not. They don't want to have that perception that, I'm taking some MLS club's young player just to play him. And, we know exactly how talented Adam is. They know exactly how talented Adam is. And are genuinely happy to have him and have him in a place where he can take advantage of the opportunity. So that fit is a really, really good thing. And, I think we're excited for the opportunity he's going to have this year to get on the field and prove to a lot of people what he can do as a professional.
Brian, appreciate the time as always. I'll see you back in a couple weeks at some time when you're back from Florida.
Sounds good. Well, appreciate it, Matt.